It is such a gift to us that you have agreed to come here. It is my pleasure to introduce Jodi-Ann Burey, who goes by who identifies as she, her. Jodi-Ann is a writer and a critic who works at the intersections of race, culture, and health equity. Jodi-Ann's new book has just come out, Authentic, The Myth of Bringing Your Full Self to Work. And she is also a public health geek, self-described, and received a public health degree from the University of Michigan School of Public Health and gave their commencement speech, which you can Google. It's on YouTube and it's pretty great. So I just am so happy that you all have come. Thank you to Robbie for sending you. Please send her my well wishes. And thank you for those of you who I found in the hall or with flyers and came. I super appreciate it. So I came to fall in love with Jodi-Ann's work because of a gathering that she hosts, Lit Lounge, which is a bringing together of artists, writers, poets, authors. Hi, how are you? Hi. Tell me your name.
Dan.
Dan, okay, Dan, what program are you in?
I work in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences.
You do, okay, got it. All right.
Welcome.
Welcome. And it is just an incredible gathering of, like, to my mind, the best and the brightest in Seattle. And Jodi-Ann talks in the book about community as the antidote to all that is hard about this world we live in. And I thank you for creating community in Seattle.
Thank you. Lit Lounge is the best.
So I think you can follow Lit Lounge on social media to find out about events. But I believe all of the events for the fall are now past.
Yes.
So this is just a fabulous book.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It feels at the beginning like a fever dream, walking through a whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
And learning from all of your experience. So I hope that I can ask you some questions, but is there a section of the book you might read to us before we start?
Yes. So normally, first of all, hey everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Megha. We did meet at Lit Lounge, The People's Art, and because I have my degree in public health, and even though my career is no longer legible as a public health career, it's still very much a public health career to me. I think once you have the training of public health, you never stop thinking about the world through that lens. And so for me, I primarily wrote Authentic as a health intervention for workers who have identities, who have been marginalized in our culture in some way, shape, or fashion. And so a big part of that is the beginning of the book. Well, I can just give some oversights in how the book is structured, but there are 6 sections that kind of analyze and look at what does it mean to bring your full self to work, or what does it mean to be authentic through different lenses. And the first section of the book is Authenticity as Care, which is the most, I think, heavily public healthy section of the book. But I always read from that first section, and so I've decided for you all I'm going to read from a different section of the book that no one has asked me to read from, but it's thinking about authenticity as a spectacle. And this chapter is called The Spectacle of Disclosure, and it's the longest chapter in the book. It's one of the hardest chapters for me to write because I just wanted to fit so much into it and I couldn't figure out how to structure it, but it has a lot of public health information in it and kind of harkens back to the beginning where I talk about being diagnosed with a spinal cord tumor back in 2018, and part of looking at authenticity within the workplace not only deals with my own racial identity and gender identity, but my identity as a disabled person and my experiences of being a disabled person at work when that disability is visible and not visible. And so this idea of bring your full self, be authentic is so heavily relying on disclosure when you have particular identities that are not visibly obvious to other people. So I just wanted to read from that, which trying to push back and interrogate on what does it mean to have an invisible disability and its intersections with institutions, specifically the workplace, and then maybe for you all will be more specific to the institution of higher education, being in the classroom. And I think it's a good example of the kind of work that this book is trying to do in reorienting this framework around authenticity. Are you ready?
Yay.
Okay, I am also ready. Also, I keep a photo of Frida Kahlo, who to me is a patron saint of chronic pain sufferers, and have really found my footing in her work, pun intended. Okay. Race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, nationality, neurodivergence, religion, disability, and for some of us, on some days, in some places more than others, our identities stealthily saunter. Geo Wyeth, a performing artist and self-described white-looking, passing trans man, underscored the tensions between identity and visibility in a roundtable discussion about institutional trans representation. Quote, "If I am Black or I am trans, and if people can't see that, then what am I? Sometimes it's hard to distinguish the difference between the self we hold inside of us and the self that is named by others. Do I have to name myself to be visible?" I have a grade D spinal cord injury caused by both spinal disease and its treatment. My body breaks dominant mental models. Yes, I had cancer. No, I did not undergo chemotherapy. Yes, I have a spinal cord injury. No, I am not completely paralyzed. Modern parlance classifies my spinal cord injury as an invisible disability. Simple, intuitive, big tent terminology. Invisible disability is my political home, filled with people who do not need to share my exact condition to experience oppressive systems that ignore and or target our minds and bodies. There we share the linked fate of marginalization, push-pull forces to pass, daily demands to disclose, and the personal journey towards naming ourselves and building community in a world that, while grateful to not see us, would prefer we stay silent, conform, or simply not exist. At first, I settled into this new home without question, eager for a place to belong. Only years later did I begin to inspect its structure, asking myself, invisible to whom? Whose gaze determines who or what is seen? Why call my own identity invisible? As my mother likes to say, am I not somebody? I know I have a spinal cord injury. I see my disability in the heating pads and blankets I always carry. It greets me when I wake up panicked, unaware that the reason I cannot move my right leg is not because my tumor spontaneously returned and tripled in size overnight, but because my body is too cold to sense my left foot crossed on top. I cringe at videos of myself speaking, gesturing wildly with fingers spread as wide as a man's knees on the subway. It took 6 months to relearn how to form a fist. My hands prefer more space. All that therapy and my palms still cramp within minutes of typing. Writing longhand for 1 hour pains my shoulder for days. I see my disability in where I go and the fatigue that decides how long I stay. The fact of my disability does not depend on what others see. I sat in that job interview gritting my teeth through pain flares, sitting and standing longer than my inflamed, dysregulated body could tolerate. Disability remained, illegible but intact. Invisible disability. Cross that out. In/visible disability. This is how I revise. The / between in and visible acknowledges the shifting visual cues that make my disability more or less apparent to others. Invisible prioritizes my gaze on my body while keeping me close to the community who nurtured me. It centers those who know without needing to be told, like one stranger who stood behind me online and recognized the scar at my nape, tucked beneath my short afro. You had a laminectomy. So did I. Invisible rejects the institutional gaze and declares, I know who I am. My knowing matters more than yours. Without an obvious cue like a cane, my body passes as normative, not yet disabled. A spinal cord injury passes, as opposed to mental illness, long COVID, ADHD, diabetes, or other chronic conditions that, despite encouraging trends, have yet been broadly accepted as disabilities, especially at work, where productivity measures our worth. Claiming disability identity is not the most important thing in Black disability politics, writes feminist and disability theorist Dr. Sammy Shulk, because the way disability has typically been used and defined does not align with the experiences and needs of Black people. Chronic conditions disproportionately affecting our communities, endometriosis and sickle cell, for example, are not commonly treated as disabilities, despite their disabling impact on their daily lives. Institutional requirements to disclose restrict who counts as disabled. Whether we disclose or claim disability identity might not change whether or how we meet our access needs, but does not change the fact that our access needs must be met. Invisibility disrupts an ableist imagination that attempts to define what we know about ourselves. The moment my body defies ableist expectations by taking up too much space, needing too much time, talking too much about access, or pushing back too hard against hostile accommodations, tests institutional boundaries that first welcomed us, and were surprised we actually came. I've moved in the world with and without disability, with and without the label. Place, policy, and people treat me one way when they see my disability, and another way when they cannot. I can tell the difference between sorry, I didn't know, and sorry, I don't care. Although I stopped hiding my disability after that job interview, I have not always disclosed to my colleagues, clients, or employers. Not because I believe disclosing would make me a better worker. I haven't seen a white man's career suffer from dishonesty. And not because I want to, capital R, represent disabled workers. I disclose inconsistently as a way to practice existing within systems on my own terms. If I must name myself to be visible, drawing on Wyatt's provocation, must I be visible to be authentic? I asked Michelle, a liberation strategist, about strategies to signify their gender identity. Michelle replied with this refrain: trans masculine people do not owe you masculinity. Trans feminine people do not owe you femininity. Non-binary people do not owe you androgyny. With that spirit, my answer is no. I do not need to be visible to be authentic, and institutions hate that.
So good. I also love that your no shirt matches your reading.
Thank you.
No.
No. I didn't even think about that, but I appreciate that.
And thank you for those of you who trickled in. I super appreciate you all coming, and I know Jodi-Ann does too.
I do.
So that section of the book is really interesting to me because it's the lived experience and also the simultaneous reflection of what it is to be in/visible, and then what it is to also disclose at other points or be accidentally disclosed. And I know some of us, and I'm the sum of us, feel a pressure to kind of lean into visible markers of identity.
Yeah.
Now we're just getting into the deep here, and it's not on the page, so I'm sorry, but like, how are we supposed to think about that? Like, do I have an obligation to lean into my visible markers of identity? Because this is like the future workforce.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to be moving through the world? That's the central question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What I talk about in the book and what keeps coming up on tour is the root word of authentic is authentis, which means to act on one's own authority. And so this idea that you're obligated in any type of way to do anything seems a little ridiculous. You know, in my community, we say, I don't have to do nothing but stay black and die, you know? So it's like, you know, where is this obligation coming from and whose narrative obliges us? You know, when I wake up and I think about my identity, I have to kind of detangle what do I think makes me authentic, what signals that maybe to other people, and oftentimes that is kind of incongruous with this institutional imagination of what it means to be authentic. And so there's this sense, like I use this example in the book just because I think it's very easy to access idea, is if I'm, as a black person, if I wear my hair in like Bantu knots, or if I wear black like natural hairstyles, that's like a black hairstyle and that's me being a black person. But if I conform to straight hair expectations, which there are Supreme Court cases on this, and it still is something that's being contested and is attempting to be legislatively protected through the Crown Act. But if I feel like my professional opportunities are going to be limited if I don't straighten my hair, so if I conform to straight hair expectations, or if I just want a little straight do, does that make me less of a black person? You know? So it's like, whose idea that this is the thing that signals blackness, just as an example, and you can fill in whatever feels most pertinent to you. And then so then if I don't do those things, does that kind of contradict my identity in some type of way? That seems a little silly. But if I do conform to straight hair expectations as a way to survive professionally and financially, is not survival also a big core part of authenticity? So there are ways that we might conceal our identities. You know, if we want to think about authenticity around like visible markers of differences, if we want to conceal our identities, that is also part of being authentically like human within a society that wants to target and erase us. I don't have this research in the book, but it was a big part of my thinking. But Jose Esteban Munoz has a book called Disidentification. And he talks a lot, he's a queer theorist, and talks a lot to queer people about the ways that in times of intense repression, they disidentify with their, you know, any type of marker of, you know, difference in some type of way. But at the same time, I used to work with someone in the global health space who is probably in his 60s now, very out, you know, gay man. And I asked him kind of how he navigated his queer identity while also working internationally and building relationships with people who, despite their own personal opinions, they come from cultures that very similar to ours, but in different ways repress same-sex relationships and identity. In some cultures, criminalize it and penalize it through death. So how do you then build relationships with people who come from that kind of political system when you're doing global health work, when you're a out gay white man in America? And for him, he's like, I've spent so many years in a closet, I am not going back. And so either approach does not, you know, call into question the authenticity of that individual. So I think it's really about our own relationships to who we are, how we like to express it, and the ways in which kind of our self-expression can be rewarded or punished in cyclical ways by the institution.
And also fluid.
Yeah.
I love the sort of agency with which you speak.
Yeah, yeah.
We can, I mean, all choice is constrained, but we can make choices
Yeah,
about how
yeah.
we want to show up on a given day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So if there was an exam on the book, which there isn't today, I would test you on the words occupational violence.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that, give us a definition, and maybe tell us how in your experience, and as you write in the book, how it's shown up in public health spaces?
Yeah, so I made a very intentional point in the book to never use the word microaggressions. I only use it once in saying that I hate this word. But what's important for me is to get to the core of what all this is. This is not about like people being not nice to you or whatever. The abuse, bullying, and discrimination that people who have identities that have been marginalized, the experiences that we have, that is violence. And it is violence that happens at work, hence occupational violence. The reason why I start the book through a health lens is that none of these things matter to me if it did not compromise our mental, physical, and emotional health. And so, and we all know that violence is a public health issue, right? It's not about an individual's kind of act of violence, but the kind of social constraints, the social determinants of health, all of those things that create the conditions of violence. And so that violence could be harm that we enact on other people, that violence could be harm that is enacted on ourselves, and it's like harm that we do to ourselves, right? When I think about occupational violence, an extreme case of this, or maybe it's not so extreme, but when the taxi medallions in New York City, there were challenges around, taxi drivers being in incredible debt because of how the industry had been disrupted by rideshare programs. And so because of that debt, there was a rapid increase in suicides among taxi drivers in New York. That is occupational violence, right? So the ways that, Uber and all this venture capital money kind of flooding the system, that does create violence for our communities, right? And so when I think about the conditions of work that harm us in particular ways, even something as commonplace as wage theft, and we can think about wage theft in a lot of different ways. I personally prefer to use wage theft. I think it's more accurate than pay inequity. And so if you're paying women, for example, or people of color or disabled people less for the same work, that compromises their ability to take care of themselves and their families, that makes them more financially vulnerable, institutionally vulnerable, that is violence. And so the things that happen to us within the workplace, they are not casual, right? It compounds, and it connects to a term that, maybe y'all have been exposed to, but weathering, and the weathering hypothesis, and the ways that racial stressors, discriminatory stressors can erode our physical health, that reduces our life expectancy. So you're going to tell me that because you continually mistreat me within the workplace and that kind of racial stress compounds, I have worse health outcomes, worse birth outcomes, and they have a shorter life expectancy. That is violence. Yeah. Thank you.
We can stop for applause.
So it's like, yeah, no, it does call for amen, because like, please, somebody help us.
So there is a beautiful line. How do you say the witch's name? Old Higgy?
Old High.
Old High.
I love Old Higgy though. That's hilarious.
Old Higgy. That's how I said it in my mind.
I love that though.
On page 50, you're talking about Old Higgy. And this sort of myth of her. I'd like to believe Old High did not suck blood nor breath, because I know the mere presence of a powerful Black woman, unmasked and unbothered, is a type of beauty that can leave its beholder breathless.
Yeah.
So the magic just came out of the page for me, the good magic.
I cry every time I read that part.
Oh.
I literally bring myself to tears, and I'm like, ugh, a bar. Like, I just get so gagged sometimes.
I mean, I felt it in my whole body as I was reading it. And that is, I feel like, a magic that I can access on occasion.
Yeah, yeah.
But there feels like one of the lessons of the book is there's a little bit of a cost.
Yeah.
So how do we access magic and also protect ourselves at the same time?
Yeah. No, thank you for that. So for a little context, there's a series of chapters in the book that's wrapped under the heading Authenticity as Myth. And so when you have a book titled Authentic, you really have to pull from places where you're like, what is the most authentic thing that I can say? Like, what's the truest thing that I can say that feels like very uniquely me? And so I found this Jamaican folklore. My family's Jamaican. I was born there. And there's this myth of this Ohai, who's a woman, just like an old haggard lady by day, and then by night, she turns into, different Caribbean cultures have a form of it, but either like a cannonball of fire or an owl. And she just kind of like soars over the village and kills babies. And then she comes back to her skin and then just kind of lives her life. And so it was me kind of pushing back on that myth. I also like the idea of shedding skins, which I think that dynamic of being one form in one way and then a different form in another way felt very like kind of how we navigate work to me. But then also pushing back on the myth of like, I don't trust mythology about women because they always make us into witches and sorcerers and that we're doing something crazy. And so I just wanted to kind of rethink that of here's this woman who is like flying. Ain't nobody bothering her. It's the middle of the night. She's having a good time, right? And she wants to visit babies, right? So why, of course, you would create some mythology that is dangerous. And within the workplace, I feel like, you know, if you have someone who's a little bit too free, a little bit too contrarian, a little too opinionated, a little too difficult. I've never heard these words personally. No one has ever described me that way at all. But when you kind of show up in that type of way, it can be dangerous. It's a dangerous contagion because if you see one person who's free, then the other person gets a little bit more free, and now you have an unruly workforce that can't be contained. And I think that's what makes unions so dangerous. You know, when we were coming up here, I was like, no contract, no coffee. Like, I'm not crossing that Starbucks picket line. And so to think of, like, I've been watching a lot of videos from the front lines of the strike, the Red Cup strike that they've been having. And I'm like, they look like they're having a good time, right? I want to be there, like, turning it up too. And so I think there's this magic that we have, and I think it's a very American or Western idea that that's something that can happen alone. But I think our greatest agency and our greatest sense of freeness is when we're doing things together. And so, you know, we opened this talk, Megha and I, for folks who came in a little late, we met at a prose and poetry salon, a reading series that I host and have been hosting. We did 5 installations this year. And that's just like, I've been describing as like the best group project like ever. It's me, a friend of mine, and we have 6 people on our hospitality team. Like, we're creating something that did not exist anymore because we want to create something in community with each other. And so what makes Lit Lounge so magical is because the subtitle of that is The People's Art, is that it really is a whole bunch of people just coming together to try to create safe spaces for each other and to hold each other in some type of way. And so I think the best way that I've ever been able to access any type of magic while also protecting myself within institutions is to do that with other people. You can't be the sole person. You are not protected. But if it's a couple of you, whether that work is visible or not, and I advocate in the book of figuring out how to gather and create community beyond the institutional gaze. And so Lit Lounge exists beyond the institutional gaze. It's just a bunch of people who like each other doing this really cool thing, and like, that's great. And so the ways that we can be unpredictable to each other, right, have spontaneous conversations and make new connections, like, who knows what could come out of that? You might get a little bow chicka bow relationship, who knows, right? But you might also like get a book club. You might also, you know, find someone who like can help support you with some issue that you're having at work, or find you a new opportunity, or you can create new business together. Like, who knows when we are like in these offline, unsurveilled connections with each other. And so what I would recommend for folks, like when you're in the workforce, or even, you know, you can practice it at school, like being a part of whisper networks, right?
Say more.
So whisper networks, anyone in a whisper network? So whisper networks are like, you might be, right? But it's like a bunch of people who are talking about like a work thing, but they're kind of whispering about it. You know, I think they're like, hey, yeah, don't work for this guy because he's a creepo. Or, hey, don't take this opportunity because X, Y, and Z. Or, you know, oh, you want to, you know, a lot of people I know do like speaking engagements. Like, oh, I saw that you did this thing with this organization. Okay, let me tell you how much they paid me. Do not accept less than that, right? So there are ways that we can create supportive communities with each other that doesn't have to be visible. It doesn't have to be surveilled. It doesn't have to exist online. But you have to have these trusted relationships with other people, because that's when you become, like, I just read Timothy Snyder's book on freedom because I interviewed him at Benaroya a couple of weeks ago, and he has this whole thing about a core tenet of freedom is to be unpredictable. And social media makes it very difficult for us to be unpredictable in terms of like our greater culture, because we're constantly surveilled. And so the example that he uses is with President Zelensky, because he's an East European historian and has a deep relationship with Ukraine. And so he was talking with President Zelensky, and everyone was like, oh, as soon as Russia attacks Ukraine, like, Zelensky's going to flee. He's going to be out, right? And in Zelensky's mind, he's like, why would I do that? Like, this is my country. These are my people. We're going to fight. And so there's a way that Zelensky is predictable to himself, but unpredictable to, like, systems of power. And so I think in similar ways, like having these whisper networks, having relationships with other people beyond the institutional gaze are ways that we can be predictable to ourselves and unpredictable to other people.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's becoming very clear to me to hear you talk through that the book is the public health intervention for the disease of occupational violence.
Yes, yes. I love that. That's a great way to put that.
So for the last 15 years or so, I've heard the words imposter syndrome thrown around, and I'm sure you all have kind of grown up with that. And you have this great line on page 101 that is roughly, stop fixing women, but fix the places that women work. How should students be thinking about so-called imposter syndrome and this idea of just fix the place as they move through their careers?
Yeah. So one I would recommend you, and if you can't access this, let me know. I'll send you a PDF. But there's a essay on Harvard Business Review that I co-authored with a colleague of mine called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. And so that lays out a very structurally similar argument to the argument that I'm laying out for Authentic, is that we have these ideas and narratives that are so easy for us to take on, but they're also narratives that come from institutions. And so anytime, like, if your company is super excited to put on a how to overcome imposter syndrome workshop, that is very sus, okay? Because they would not promote anything that would undermine them in any type of way, right? And so it's just like, hey, you have issues with your self-doubt, go over there in this little conference room, and then you sort out your issues, and when you come back out of this conference room, we're still going to tell you that you ain't shit. We're still going to interrupt you when you're speaking. We're still going to underpay you, and we're still going to give Bill and Tom credit for your ideas. Like, so this idea that, you know, women are disproportionately, you know, just out here doubting themselves left, right, and center doesn't account for the fact that we exist within systems that disproportionately send those messages of you are not enough and you are not worth it to people who do not fit the dominant norm of the workplace, right? So how do we think about these narratives, and where is the working? Like, where is the work and the labor of solving this being subscribed to, prescribed to, whatever the right RIED word is that I'm trying to think of. But it's like, is it me? Am I supposed to fix that? Or are y'all supposed to fix that? It's not really on me. You're telling me that I need to bring my full self to work, and that is somehow going to function like a contagion, that if I just bring myself and then you bring yourself, and then suddenly this whole entire workplace isn't going to keep underpaying us. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so it kind of keeps this on this, like, it's very much like a treadmill logic of you're working, and you're definitely exhausted, and you're definitely putting in the work, but then you hop off the treadmill and you're in the exact same place that you were when you started. And so the way I would think about imposter syndrome is to, and what I argue in that essay, is that being unsure and having doubt is like super normal. I don't know anybody who's ever entered a new role or organization or whatever, and they're just like, I got this. That's also like a very American like ethos of just like, it doesn't matter if you actually have skills, you just need to have confidence. That is like something very unique to our particular culture, but it is incredibly normal and I would argue healthy to feel a little bit unsure. I think that keeps us accountable to like making sure we cross every T and dot every I, and, you know, being in community with each other and say, how does this actually work, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that is normal. And I think the way that bias and discrimination works within these institutions is that it takes a very healthy amount of self-doubt that everyone experiences, and it exacerbates that for particular identity groups. And so what I would encourage is sometimes being unsure is normal. Sometimes being unsure is kind of what learning feels like. And then sometimes that is not normal. And usually when it's like not normal, there's something in the water, right? Mm-hmm. And so let's look at what's in that water and whether that's a healthy place for you to be.
Thank you for that. And I try to get this essay, and if you can't find it, you can ask me and I'll get it for you. I just have found that framework of fix the place, not the women, to be such a freeing construct.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So many of us have been asked, you have been asked, these students will be asked to take on diversity, equity, and inclusion jobs. Maybe not tomorrow, but probably again in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I think so. Maybe. We'll see.
It might be called something else.
Maybe called something else. But my question for you is, what should we ask if we get hired for one of these jobs? What are the questions we should be thinking about?
I'm gonna tell you, when I was writing this book, I was fighting for my life to like not be so doom and gloom. I was fighting, and on this tour, I feel like every time I talk, people looked at me like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "Yeah, it is bad." So I'm fighting right now. That's why I wanted to talk to students, because there's something about, and why I love doing commencement speeches. I'm just stalling right now, but it's like there's something about doing commencement speeches where you have to be honest, but you have to be hopeful. And in most times in our history in America, those two things are always in conflict. So I always think it's like a very interesting professional challenge, and I'm feeling that right now. So if you are pursuing, okay, I'll do it in a couple of ways. If you want one of these jobs, right? Congratulations, you're the best among us, right? So if you want one of these jobs, or if you find yourself like, and at least for me, it was the best entry point for me to get between nonprofits and for-profits. DEI was the way that I did that, right? You have to ask yourself, why do you want this? What is the goal of this work, right? And try to define that goal in ways that do not depend so much on the institution that you're working for. Second is thinking about the ways that you are resourced and the expectations of what you're supposed to do with those resources. Here's what's most common. People in DEI roles do not have decision-making authority. They do not have budgets, sometimes at all, or their budgets are not adequate, or their budgets, they do not get to make decisions on their own budgets. We all know how public health works, right? It took, 30 years for people to wear seatbelts, right? It took probably an equal amount of time for people to be a little sus about cigarette smoke. Behavior change is a long game. And so there are multiple different ways that you can inspire and encourage behavior change. And you have to think about all the levers that you have for that change. And so I'm very proud of myself. I'm like obsessed with the social ecological model. I don't know if anyone else.
That old thing?
Is that old now? Is it old? I'm obsessed with it. I'm so obsessed with it that I made my own little drawing in Canva and I put it in the book, right? Because I think like those concentric circles, like so much of DEI work only focuses on an individual's attitude, beliefs, and knowledge. That's where all of the work goes. And there's an incredible story that I put in here, a friend of mine, Jason, who's deaf. And that's what he focused on. One, he had to deal with his own work of making sure, which surprised me, because I'm like, in my mind, it's like you're deaf or you're not. Like you can hear or you can't hear. I know there are gradations, like people who are hard of hearing and different ways that people communicate across that difference. But if you have an employee that says that they're deaf and need interpreters, there is no other way that they are going to participate in work without interpreters. But it was still very challenging for him to make sure that he had interpreters for all his meetings, right? So then Jason does his own work to make sure that his colleagues and the people that he was working with understood deaf culture. They understood different ways of how to engage with him. I know some ASL, I can do some finger spelling, but I've had a whole conversation with deaf people just doing notes, right? Just like we share a phone and we're just like, ha, 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 you know, like, it's like there's gestures, like there are a lot of different ways that you can communicate with someone who, maybe they don't read lips or they can't hear even a little bit, and you don't have an interpreter. It is possible, right? Anyway, he does all this work, and then his employer goes through like a massive round of layoffs. He's still there, but the whole like inclusive culture around deaf identity is gone. And so I'm happy to say that he doesn't work there anymore. He actually works at a deaf university now. So there's like different structures and support for deaf people, obviously. But I think it's important to think about the social ecological model, even if it's outdated. I went to public school 10 years ago. I'm so sorry. But like, where are we attacking like DEI work? Yeah. Amber, okay. Yeah. So where are we attacking like DEI work? And most often, if your workplace is serious, it will look further up the chain of like the policies and kind of more structural systems within that workplace. And if they are not serious, they will want you to do like potlucks and panels. And all that stuff happens kind of lower, like downstream. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think you should set expectations, be very clear about what you are trying to do, and understand that different places define these things in different ways, and I don't want you exhausting or beating yourself up if you don't feel like you are successful in a system that is not designed for you to be successful.
That totally answers the question.
Yeah.
Be wary of potlucks and panels. Ask around about policies and what the sort of, the intentions are. Is there decision-making authority? Is there money attached?
Yeah.
And then what is your own investment in this?
And sometimes you don't have any of those things. You don't have the money, you don't have decision-making. You're like, yeah, I'm still going to do this anyway.
There you go.
And just Robin Hood that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you go in, you just say, listen, this is kind of crazy, but I'm going to try to get these organizations or these partners a platform. I'm going to use my position to protect like other marginalized workers because I can do that in this role. And so there are times where I've had DEI positions where I could not do that work that I actually wanted to do or the work that I thought I was going to do, but I redefined it for myself of, there's a concept in the book called access thievery. It's the ways that we can steal access from institutions. Because the crip theorist who came up with it, J. Logan Smiggles, there's this quote where he says, like, I did not ask for accommodations. I told a bunch of lies at work today so I can get the access that I needed. And so if you can do that in some type of professional capacity, which is what I've done, is like you go in and you just try to steal access for other people, try to be the buffer, which comes at a cost, right? But I think if you have some sensibility about it, where you're not like emotionally invested, you're just like, hey, I'm here to just try to steal some access for some people, and then I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Questions?
Is that too harsh?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to keep it real with y'all.
Yeah, access thievery, it's on the test. Questions from the group?
I have a lot of
Perfect.
things on this topic. So, from my perspective, I've been trying to figure out how to edge into that space without needing to be in a DEI role, because I didn't know the things that I hadn't thought about those things, but I just have had barriers getting into them. So my thought was, do it the white people way. Like, do it like white people would. Create some sort of consulting program, write legislation, change the system. We have a system where we now require employees, students, everyone to take sexual harassment training. So I know that took a long time as well.
Yeah.
But try to mirror that project and just inch forward in a corporate type of selling it as this is good for your company, this is good for, for business, this is good for your employees, but also creating legislation in parallel to mandate something of that nature when it comes to racism and mistreatment in the workforce. Because I do believe, like you have stated, not believe, but I know that mistreatment, societal employment, whatever it might be, absolutely impacts our health.
Yeah.
There is, we had a speaker in my policy class a week or two ago, I don't know, lost track of time, but, and what he said just reverberates in my brain. But it was the way that you treat someone directly impacts their health. And it just it's very clear. It's very simple. From that perspective, it is a very complex social issue. But I agree with a lot of things that you're saying, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think there's no question there, but what I can offer is I heard DeRay McKesson say this on the podcast once, where they often say, like, how do you eat an elephant, right? And the normal is like, oh, a bite at a time. Like, that's how you handle a big task. You take it as a bite at a time. And then he was like, no, it's like many bites at once, right? And so you got to have a lot of people eating the elephant in that type of way.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, if you want to work on a policy side, that's important, right? And we also know that there are limitations, right? Right now, it is policy, the last time I checked, on the books, that being a Black person, being queer, being a woman, like, these are protected classes in the United States, that we should not be experiencing, employment discrimination. And that is rampant. Not only is it rampant, they're celebrating that right now, right? Where they're targeting marginalized people in, like, really, really big ways and without any type of repercussion. Who knows what the job numbers are, but over 350,000 Black women have been pushed out of the workforce. And that is horrifying to some people, and then some people are looking at that and they're like, thank God, this new regime is working. And so, but that's not to undermine the work that's necessary, right? To make sure there are things on the books. And then there are people that are going to work in this type of way, and then there's people that are going to work in that type of way. I think what would be great is when you have policy folks that you stay connected with people who aren't doing policy, right? Be in collusion, be in a whisper network, right? Be in some type of relationship beyond the institutional gaze that ensures that, the direction that we're going towards, we have a similar vision. It doesn't have to be the same vision or the same tactics, but I do think we need to be working in the same direction of protecting our people.
Thank you. We're almost out of time.
No!
I know. We just want to be with you all the time.
Okay. I'll do shorter answers.
Well, does anyone have one last question?
I can ask a question.
Yes,
It's still percolating in my brain, so forgive me if it doesn't make sense. But as you were talking, I thought a lot about how research and evaluation can leverage team science. I feel like I don't think there's any project that I've ever worked on where it was just done independently. And I've seen in some spaces folks like leverage tools like Briggs-Myers, 5 Dimensions, as a way to try and get at how people can kind of bring more of themselves to work. And I was wondering what your thoughts are around this idea of trying to unpack or tackle this notion of working to one's talents while at the same time perhaps not exploring authenticity as you're presenting it in this book. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts.
Yeah.
On these.
I only have thoughts. They're not even fully formed. But I only have thoughts. One, I would question some of these assessments, where they come from, how are they designed, and what they were for. I know there's some a little iffy about some of these things. I don't know the details of it, so I won't speak to it. But, you know, these things aren't the be-all, end-all of, like, how do we understand ourselves. They were created by human beings and sometimes for nefarious reasons, right? All of that said, I do think it's cool to, like, understand parts of who you are. I often lament to people that, you know, I was born on a small island in the 80s, so I do not have a time of birth, okay? So I can't do all the bitchy things of figure out where my charts are. Like, I can't do that. It makes me so mad. Like, astrolocate, what is the stuff like that? Like, you put your stuff on the map. It's amazing.
Chart,
yeah. My birth chart and all those type of things. I can't do any of that. And it kind of makes me annoyed, right? But I journal a lot. You know, I think I have a really good awareness and kind of relationship to myself. And I think what's cool about some of these programs is that it helps give you language to understand yourself. And then because, like, if everyone on the team is doing it, then we all kind of have a shared language to talk about these things, and we can get these shortcuts to understanding who we are and kind of working towards our talents. Like, I think the goal of that is fantastic. And I do think that we should work to our talents. There are things that I just, like, as talented as I think I am, I'm not the best equipped to do those things, which is helpful to know because then I can work with other people. And so even with Lit Lounge, this reading series that I put on, there's just like a hosting energy that I just don't have. And so, like, one of my really good friends, she has that. And so we're able to work on something together. Yes, you do know that friend. Yeah, and I've learned so much from her, which makes me a better person, a better host for this event. And so if you take something like that for, like, a larger problem than, like, a Friday night hangout, right? But if you take that, then the work that you can do is incredible. So I don't have very strong opinions about it. I think the goal of, like, being aware of yourself and your talents and working towards those talents is important. I don't know how much time I would spend on those things. There's this woman who I'm obsessed with, Tressie McMillan Cotton.
Aww.
And she's been doing a lot of podcasts and interviews lately, and her thing that she says a lot is just, like, pick a thing, do it with somebody else, and then, like, do it again tomorrow, right? So I picked my thing, Lit Lounge, and I do it with other people, and then I kind of keep doing it. And I think the process of doing things with other people, that also helps us learn about who we are more so, and maybe in conjunction with these, like, individual assessments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wait, can we do the second and last question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You speak of great influence by the trifecta. Bell Hooks,
Yes.
Toni Morrison,
Yes.
Audre Lorde.
Yes.
What are your top 3 books?
Okay.
One by each.
Bell Hooks, the book is called Black Looks, Race and Representation. I read that in undergrad, and I read it a gazillion times since. Highly, highly recommend it. It is so old. If you think the social ecological model old, I think she wrote that in the 90s, right? But it is still so good. And Bell Hooks is a brilliant mind. Toni Morrison, I would recommend The Source of Self-Regard. It is a compilation of speeches and essays and a whole bunch of stuff, so I think you'll get, like, a good sampling of her body of work. If you want to read a novel of hers, I would recommend Sula, which I reread recently. The main character, Sula, is a hoot. She really just does what she wants. She don't care whose man she stole. Okay. And then for Audre Lorde, I would highly, highly, highly recommend, whether this is your personal experience or not, but I would recommend you read the Cancer Journals. We know Audre Lorde to be, you know, this great advocate for self-preservation, but you do not get any of that work if you don't understand her first experience through cancer. And so a lot of her scholarship comes from her health experiences. And I think as public health practitioners, it's really important for us to think about the ways lived experience can create scholarship, can create knowledge, and the Cancer Journals is a great example of that.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Jodi-Ann.